All right, and welcome everyone to PW Grocer's Environmental Echo, our monthly podcast, and this is our first one of the new year, 2025. We've got a great topic and a great guest again. We've got, for our monthly podcast, we've got Brian Tymann, founder and CEO of BGT Consulting, which is based in Westhampton and delivers a variety of environmental-related services. And Brian, before we hop into the show here, I do want to just make a couple of quick announcements to our listeners. If anyone's interested in getting a hold of us, best way to do that is through our website, which is www.pwgrocer.com/podcast. If you guys have questions, comments, thoughts, or topics, ideas for future guests, or anything you want to reach out to us for, as I've said, we've got a crack team of marketing professionals there working on that website, so they'll get back to you in a responsive manner, and we do look forward to hearing from you. But back to Brian, interesting guest. We've known him for years. He's a great guy. He's studied environmental science in college and has always had a passion for the natural world. In addition to operating BGT, he owns and invests in a host of business ventures, serves as a trustee for the Village of Westhampton Beach, and is involved in a host of community organizations. Outside of work, he enjoys foraging for edible wild plants. We'll have to dive into that a little bit. That sounds pretty interesting. Playing the drums, and most importantly, spending time with his wife and young daughters. Also joining us, we have Kris Almskog, who is now our Senior VP and Director of Business Development and a repeat offender on the show here. Guys, it's great to have both of you here today with us.
Happy to be here again.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, thank you. Brian, Kris, welcome to the Echo. Let's get started with obviously one of the issues we've covered a couple times, but it's still a very hot topic here, particularly on Long Island, and it's become even hotter lately. And it's at the front and center of Long Island. That's wastewater. More specifically, wastewater collection and treatment here on the island. Brian, as we said, you're currently a trustee for the Village of Westhampton, which recently completed the installation of a commercial wastewater collection system that is connected to a treatment plant located at Suffolk County's Gabreski Airport. This is super interesting, and it's great. We've got an actual up and running project. But, when you were running for trustee, you made sewering downtown Westhampton Beach a priority. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, great question. And again, thanks for having me here. We've all known in Westhampton Beach that sewering was a very important topic. It's been known for many, many years. It's just been a very difficult thing to tackle. And when I saw that we had momentum, and when I say momentum, I mean we had a mayor, Maria Moore, who was focused on that task of creating a sewer district and sewering, and she needed help. And my friend Rob and I decided we would step up to the plate and see if the public agreed that it was such an important issue that we made it our focus. Our focus was to sewer downtown Westhampton Beach finally, after talk for 50, 60, 70 years. And I do believe the only reason it hadn't happened is just because it was such a big task to accomplish. And we put together the right team as a village board and made it happen. And it was super important to me for two reasons. The environmental impact, or I would say the environmental impact of not sewering, and the economic impact. The village had its hands tied in terms of what it could do in terms of expansion, and it desperately needed, the business community needed the ability to create more wet uses. We needed more housing downtown. And although we're a very small village, we wanted to be, one of the first that pioneered this initiative and hopefully serve as a model for other municipalities to do the same.
You just brought up a whole bunch of great points in my mind. The environment, the economy. You guys are a small village. This had to be a heavy lift. I mean, how did you guys get this off the ground, get it going, get it done?
We got asked that question by a lot of people, different levels of government and community status. And my answer has always been the same, is that it had to be done by a cohesive group of people with the same mission, working collaboratively together. End of story. It has to be a group effort. There were no politics involved. We weren't fighting each other for credit. We all had the same mission. And that's how it got done. And as you mentioned, small municipality, but we all kind of stepped up to the plate and, again, didn't compete with each other. We were complementing each other. What can we do to help? And I have to give an enormous amount of credit to our leader, Maria Moore, our former mayor, who throughout the whole process, we joked all the time. We would say, couldn't be done without you. And she goes, no, I needed you to make this happen. And we said, no, we needed you to make it happen. No, we needed you. And we went back and forth. None of us wanted the credit. We just wanted to get it done.
Fantastic. And the other 2 points, let's start with the environment. What are the environmental benefits or improvements that this system would lead to for the village?
Well, there's kind of an old saying, which is more than a saying. It's reality that, on Main Street in Westhampton Beach, if you flush a toilet with a certain colored dye in the toilet, you'll see that color in Moneybog Bay in 24 hours. So we had a real problem. We were in a spot where there was nowhere for waste to go. And the private septic tanks were merely holding tanks for,
the tide to go out, probably.
Tide to go out, or the truck to come in to pump it.
Mm-hmm.
So, from an environmental standpoint, it was very clear, very direct. Our waste was just going right into our bay.
I mean, yeah, where you guys are, you can clearly see the summertime, the algal blooms, the brown tides, all that as a direct effect, not just from your community, but many others on the South Shore and even further inland on Long Island, where the stuff's just going right into the groundwater.
Yeah, and we had a somewhat of a unique challenge where we are in Westhampton Beach, in that our bay water is kind of sandwiched by 2 inlets with flushing from the ocean, and that comes in and out with the tides. But we don't really have any flushing in our area, so we are much more susceptible to the impacts of excessive nutrient overload being put into the water. So it's a really sensitive area.
We see that a few places on the South Shore of Long Island, and obviously I know you love being in the water. You grew up in the water. Your kids are in the water. I know you still go swimming about once a week, right, in the ocean. So it is an extremely important thing for residents of the South Shore. I was at a few political events, leading up to this over the past few weeks, and several supervisors made it very clear that if you're a developer on Long Island, you want to do some housing, you need to come with a viable sewer plan, because if not, that is a hurdle. And the fact that you guys were able to start that battle, 12, 15 years ago is huge. And so at the time when you started it, were you seeing any community concerns about going down that pathway? Because I've heard of some communities who get a little nervous when they hear sewers. They think high density. They think it's going to change basically change the atmosphere of the town. So did you see any of that, anti-sewering, community outreach?
Great question. Not much. The only anti-sewering sentiment that 2 things that happened. One was a little bit of what you just said. Some people a little bit concerned, what does this mean to the village? Will it change the dynamic of the village? Will it cause excessive building? That was one question, but it wasn't a hot button issue. The only other one was cost, which there was a bit of a chicken and egg thing going on, where we couldn't really calculate cost until we got to a certain point to calculate that cost. So we had to invest a little bit to be able to determine what the cost would be. But even that was pretty minimal. I think a lot of the residents in the village understood the importance of sewering and helping our downtown, which, as one resident put to me when I was running for office, said looked like a mouth with half the teeth knocked out. And, that really spoke volumes about the condition of downtown Westhampton Beach. It was let go for a while, left alone. And, I think the sewering really kind of addressed a lot of the issues and really, made a lot of sense to the residents.
Brian, it was a great question, Kris, and I appreciated the answer. And, you mentioned, money, right? So what was obviously we talked about the environmental benefits, right? Groundwater, surface water, how it's all related, and, keeping this stuff out of there and how that really improves things. What about the economy? What were the economic benefits? You said, downtown stores started to come back, maybe restaurants, shops. What else?
Well, I've always been a big believer, and this is going more into my personal political philosophy, that in all the discussions about housing and workforce housing and keeping people around in the area, that the most logical starting point for addressing housing is in downtowns. And that's, I feel like that's been the case throughout the history of the country. People who worked downtown where the economy was and where people went to shop lived there or had the option to live there. So I think that addressing the sewering and the reconstruction of our main street really kind of addressed a lot of different things all at once. As we said, we were talking about environmental benefits, but also the ability for businesses to expand, wet uses, restaurants, bars, places that bring people, but also employ people. And those employed people have an option to live there. And it really kind of comes full circle. So I've been a big believer in this approach to rebuilding a downtown, Westhampton Beach in particular, to kind of cover all of those needs.
This is fantastic. Are there plans to maybe expand or reach out to additional areas to include in the district? I mean, I know you're probably limited by the capacity of the plant you're hooked up to, but maybe they expand the plant. What's the future hold?
So when we created this, as I'm sure you guys know, what we needed to do was create a sewer district, and in doing so, needed to establish the entire village as a district. Didn't mean we needed to service that whole area, but it was a sewer district and it is a sewer district. The service area of importance, as we've talked about, was downtown, Main Street, restaurants, bars, housing. So the movement outward from there, the plan is to expand the area that's sewered in segments in terms of areas of most importance. And as you said, to do that, we need more capacity at the sewage treatment plant. I've talked with County Executive Romaine extensively about this, and he's a huge supporter of sewering and building infrastructure in downtowns to stimulate growth and expansion. So he's fully on board with helping out, and we're in the process of working on expanding that sewage treatment plant to accommodate.
Wow. So, I mean, do you see the future, like, the residential structures, off of Main Street? You said the whole village had to be part of the sewer district. So someday maybe, Mrs. Smith on Elm Street might have a connection.
Correct. Yes, that is. We've in our planning, we've divided the sewering into 4 phases, which was worked on by our whole group of professionals. The outside residential community would be basically phase 4 out of 4.
Oh, wow. So what phase are you guys at right now?
We completed phase 1. So we're entering phase 2.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. You mentioned our county exec, who's been a former guest on the podcast, and we know him well, and he is very pro-sewer and, doing what's right for the environment in Suffolk County. So we're looking forward to many good years to come with this stuff. But wastewater and its potential reuse. This may be something that's of interest to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the primary environmental issues facing our region. You know, numerous studies have showed, have depicted the lack of treatment has negatively impacted the groundwater and the surface waters. What other water quality concerns do you see here on Long Island?
Well, addressing wastewater in concentrated areas like downtowns and sewering them, I see as, a low-hanging fruit. But there are all types of, as you just mentioned, I'm most excited about the innovative approaches to how we can tackle these things. So sewering, is a very, very direct way and to approach wastewater. But as you just said, reuse. That's exciting. When I was in college, a lot of the courses I took in environmental science addressed challenges with places like golf courses. And I feel very fortunate to have been involved over the past 10 years or so with the design and approval of a golf course in East Quogue that checks the boxes on every one of those things that I loved studying and thinking about how they could be done better in terms of recapture of your, it's at the point now where golf courses are far more responsible and superior in environmental approach than residential properties. Thinking outside the box, being held to high standards by the state and beyond, but in terms of the way they operate and recapturing water that irrigates the turf and reusing it and recapturing the nutrients in those. The term fertigation is something that that I was introduced to 7-8 years ago, blew my mind. But you're talking about a body of groundwater that has excessive nutrients in it from whatever sources, and utilizing that to irrigate turf or to irrigate agriculture.
Yeah. And utilizing it before it has the potential to get in a nearby water body and cause algal blooms and things like that. So it's really recycling, reusing of that basically water that has value if it's applied in the right spot, and then putting it through the golf courses and having those nutrients absorbed. It is really critical, and that's another thing that, again, the county executive has been talking about recently the past few months, about looking for opportunities instead of putting wastewater into the bays and treated wastewater into the oceans, reusing it, looking for opportunities to reuse it, effectively and safely on the island through golf courses or other applications. So that is something I'm excited about going forward to as well, and I'm glad you got involved in that project and kind of pushed for creative solutions like that.
Yeah,
I agree with Kris, and we know the project. We were involved with you on that one, the fertigation, the whole process. I mean, golf course is almost completely built out over there. It's they're irrigating, they're using the water as intended. And so far, I'd knock on wood, but I don't want to create any unnecessary sound effects here on the show. But it seems to be it's headed in the right direction. So if more people could be cognizant of that, and we can push that out there, it would certainly be a benefit to the environment. And as you said, there's numerous sources, not just wastewater, that are generating those nutrients like nitrogen getting into the groundwater. And another great point, you mentioned the residential folks like myself. I'll go buy a few bags of fertilizer at my local hardware store, but no one's checking how much I'm putting down, or if I'm putting too much. I know if I put way too much down, the grass gets burnt, right? But even then, if it may not burn, but I could still be putting a lot down, more than I need. And, I do live on the South Shore, shallow groundwater, it's all going right to the bay, or a large percentage of it is. People need to be cognizant, and we have, years ago, they've invoked some rules where you can't fertilize before April 1st. That's the grass. They want the grass to start to, get active again and not be dormant, so it can start to take that stuff up right away. Those are great rules, but, enforcement, a lot of homeowners don't understand them, don't follow them, don't know them. an absolutely a great point that, golf courses are aware of these things. They are doing them, and the ones we work with are all doing them properly.
Yeah. It's, the word that comes to mind all the time with this conversation for me is opportunity. I love the opportunity to create new standards, which we did with the golf course in East Quogue. And then other people and other projects follow suit. So the opportunity there is to create other solutions and other standards that can then be modeled for future development. I engaged a good friend of mine who's a staunch environmental steward, former teacher in Westhampton Beach High School, environmental science, who jumped on board and was very supportive of this golf course in particular. And he said he was supportive because he saw it as an opportunity to help it be developed in a responsible way.